Hello, my fellow aviators. Welcome back to another virtual training video. In this video, we're going to train you about flying around the pattern and, most importantly, how to land the airplane. I get a lot of questions from my students on this, and there's a lot of things that are overwhelming early on, so I thought I would record this video for their benefit as well as for yours. So here we are on runway 11 at the Nampa Airport, and so one of the very first things that I encourage folks to do is to go ahead and bug your runway heading so that when you are flying on departure leg, you can maintain runway heading. Okay, so the brakes are off, power's going full, airplane starts to move, and you can expect it immediately to start pulling to the left thanks to the turning tendencies. So to compensate for that, you're going to apply right rudder. The next thing that I'm going to want to see you do is looking down at your airspeed tape, in this case where I've got a G1000, and as soon as you see it move, starts to say the words airspeed is alive. Then you do want to keep it on the center line as best you can. Get to your rotation speed, start pulling back on the stick or the yoke, whichever kind of plane you're flying, and up in the air you go. Now we're here in a 172, so we're going to look for a departure climb out speed of around 85 knots, which you're not going to hit immediately. As you can see here, we are building speed towards that. Now the VY on this aircraft is less than 85 knots, so you can see there is VY about 75. Why am I suggesting 85? Simply margin of safety. One of the things that kills pilots is the departure stall. You get distracted in the cockpit and suddenly the stall horn's going and bad things happen. So the faster that you're going above your stall speed, the more cushion you have to compensate for that. So here we are getting pretty darn close to 85, and I'm still on runway heading, which is what we want to see. And the very first radio call in a non-towered airport is going to be something like this. Nampa Tower, Skyhawk 86 Juliet is turning left crosswind for runway 11 Nampa. So call sign of the airport at the beginning and the end of the call. In the pattern, I would strongly encourage my students to keep their angle of bank at 20 degrees or less, because as bank increases, coefficient of lift decreases and stall speed increases. And you're already close to the ground, so we don't need to have any of that stuff happening. And then you're going to know you're at 90 degrees when your heading bug arrives at your 3 o'clock mark on your HSI, which is right there. And so we're going to keep on climbing. And we're looking over our shoulder, and we're going to make our next turn, and we're going to say Nampa traffic, Skyhawk 86 Juliet turning left downwind for runway 11 Nampa. And we're going to be continuing to climb at full power. We're going to be banking at 20 degrees or less, and we are going to be keeping on turning until we have the reciprocal heading of the runway heading, which with the bug being at the bottom of the HSI, you know you're going to be there. And very shortly after that, you are probably going to have arrived at pattern altitude, which we are pretty much there. So then we're going to pull power back a little bit, and we're going to lower the nose so that we stop climbing. And if you have a G1000 in your aircraft, just put the meatball on the horizon, and you'll know that, which I'm not doing a very great job of here, you'll know that you'll stop climbing. All right, so the next thing here is start thinking about the left-hand turn to base that we have coming up. And so when you get to a point where you're looking over at that runway, and by the way, good separation for downwind is if your runway is about midway up your strut, as you can see right there. If you're too far from the airport, it's going to be high on the strut. If you're too close to the runway, rather, it's going to be low on the strut. All right, so now we need to start slowing down. We've passed those 1,000-foot markers, so we're going to do our gumps, make sure our fuel is on both, that our mixture is rich, that our undercarriage is down. If we have a constant speed prop, that it's pushed forward, that our seat belts and switches are in the right position, we have a landing light on, and we are then going to apply 1 notch of flaps to start helping the plane slow down. And that's going to also make the plane want to bubble up. You're going to want to push forward on the yoke or on the stick, depending upon the plane that you are flying. When you get to be about 45 degrees off the runway, you're going to make a call like Nampa traffic, Skyhawk 86 Juliet turning left base for runway 11. And now, ideally what you're looking for here is your speed is going to drop below 85 knots, where you're going to apply your 2nd notch of flaps. As soon as you do that, you're going to need to add power and point the nose down to maintain airspeed, because you have just significantly increased drag on the aircraft when you apply 20 degrees or more of flaps. In base, I like to see about 80 knots. And again, now our heading bug is right over at 9 o'clock. And in Nampa, as we're crossing the freeway, which you can see down below us, we want to be right around 3,000 feet, which is where we are. And then we're going to make another nice shallow turn. Say Nampa traffic, Skyhawk 86 Juliet is turning base to final for runway 11 Nampa. And ideally, you're going to roll out of this turn. And as you're doing this, you're going to decrease your speed to about 70 knots. And you can't see PAPI lights here in the simulation, but you're going to want to see one red and one white. And then you're going to want to start getting that speed as slowed down to about 70 knots. So there's our PAPIs. We've got 3. So I'm actually a little low in this particular approach. And our speed is coming down. And so now this phase of landing is what I call the approach, and you want to have those runway numbers stay on the same spot on the windshield as you get down to the runway. As soon as you pass over top of them, power to idle, and you're going to start what's called the round out, which is really the point before the flare, and you're just going to now hold the nose up and hold the nose up and hold the nose up and try not to land, and there it is, the mains touch the ground first. And that is exactly what you are looking for. So let's go around one more time, and we'll just cover off that final approach, round out, and landing phase. Let's put our flaps up there, which we should have done before we left the ground. So you can see where the aircraft is sinking a little bit. What are you sinking? It's one of my favorite pilot jokes. But anyway, that's for another time. So here we are climbing back out on our departure heading. We've got our airspeed increasing, and we are going to go do it again. So as we get to 4 to 500 AGL, that's when we're going to make our crosswind turn. And again, and so we're going to lower the nose here a little bit. We're climbing out a little bit too steep, and that's why our airspeed wasn't where we wanted it to be. So as you can see, lower the nose, airspeed starts picking up. And just a moment more, we are going to turn left crosswind, which we'll do now. So Nampa traffic, Skyhawk 86 Juliet, turning left crosswind, runway 11. So in your turns, make sure you stay coordinated. That means your rudder, your brick, which is on a G1000, is this little line right there, is staying underneath the triangle. That means you've got a coordinated turn. And in this case here, you want to roll out when our heading bug is at the 3 o'clock position on the HSI, keeping coordinated. And we can pitch up just a little bit because we're a little bit below 85 knots. And then looking over here, it's time to turn downwind. So Nampa traffic, 86 Skyhawk 86 Juliet, turning left downwind. Notice in my turns, by the way, I'm not exceeding 20 degrees of bank, and I think I talked about that in lap number 1, so I won't talk about it again. But it is very, very important to keep that safety at the margin of safety. All right. And I'm going to bring it in a little higher this time because I want to be able to really emphasize the point about keeping those numbers at the same spot. When you're on a final, you want the numbers of the runway to be at the same spot on the windshield the entire time. If they are moving up the windshield, you are not going to make it to the numbers. If the numbers are moving down the windshield, you are going to shoot past the numbers. And that's really not what we want to do. The most important thing is a constant rate of descent. That means you are lined up on center, you have a constant airspeed, which is controlled by pitch, and you have a constant rate of descent, which is controlled by power. Now, if you're too high or too low, you're going to adjust that with power. You're not going to be yanking the nose up and down because you don't want to be changing your airspeed. Pitch needs to be constant, and you're really going to pretend like you're trying to shoot the numbers, like bang, 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 as you're coming down towards them. So here, we're going to do this again here. We'll get ourselves set up. So there's our pattern altitude. I was a little late getting there. So I'm going to keep it a little higher this time on final just to sort of illustrate this point that I'm trying to make. So there's going to be our first notch of flaps, and we're going to turn. Now normally we'd be descending, but like I say, here in the virtual world things are a little different. I'm going to be able to illustrate the point I'm making, I think, just a little bit better by coming in on a slightly higher approach. And so I'm pulling back power just a little bit, And if you need to bleed speed, the fastest way to bleed speed to get in that flap safe zone is to just pull the nose up and reduce power. So we're coming in about 300 feet higher than we did in the first one, because I really want to be able to illustrate this point about getting those numbers to be fixated right on the windscreen. So here we go, and we'll get flaps here turned in probably on this turn. So Nampa traffic, Skyhawk 86 Juliet turning base to final for runway 11. There we go. So we're just 2 notches above flap speed. I'm going to put them in anyway here in the virtual cockpit. Okay, so now we're very, very high, but this is going to help me to illustrate the point that I want to make. So we have the airspeed that we want, which is handled with pitch. And so now I'm too high, so we're going to pull power. But here's where, this is really what I want you to pay attention to. See how the number 11 is staying at the same spot on the windshield the whole time down, staying at the same spot on the windshield. I'm headed right for those numbers. My airspeed is relatively constant. In this case, it's a little high, but that's okay. I'm flying to the numbers, flying to the numbers, flying to the numbers, flying to the numbers. Can't see the numbers. Look at the end of the runway, round out, and I ballooned a little bit right there. Round out and just hang out level until the energy dissipates, and then try not to land, trying not to land, trying not to land, and that's the flare, and that is how you do it. So by trying not to land, you're consistently pulling back on the yoke or the stick, which is going to ensure that you don't hammer the nose wheel into the runway and begin porpoising, because you're going to have that needed pitch up attitude to make sure that the mains land before the nose wheel. And then even once the mains are down, don't just dump the stick or the yoke forward, because you're going to pound the nose wheel into the ground. Instead, keep on holding it back until the airspeed bleeds off and you literally just can't hold the front wheel up in the air any longer, and then the front wheel is going to be softly put down on the runway.
All right, guys, so now that you've seen it in the Microsoft Flight Simulator, we're going to do it in the real world. So we're sitting on runway 29 at Nampa Airport. We've got our heading bug just like I instructed you before, so we are going to go and take off now and walk around the pattern, fly around the pattern. Okay, airspeed is alive. See, this plane does not take long to get off of the ground. Front wheel's off, mains are off. That was only a few hundred feet tops. And Chris, you'll keep an eye on that for me if you would, please.
Yep.
That's your responsibility. All right, so we are climbing out, runway heading, just like I taught you guys in Microsoft Flight Simulator. We're not flying a 172. In this case, we're flying a light sport, which has an exceptionally low stall speed compared to the 172. So I'm very happy to be climbing out at just 80, anywhere between 75 and 80 knots. And this aircraft is just fine. You can actually go pitch up quite a bit more, but there's no need to do that at this point in time. So again, just like we did in Simulator, when we got over 400 AGL, we're going to make that radio call. We're going to say Nampa traffic 5 Golf X-ray, turning left crosswind, runway 29, Nampa. And keeping our angle of bank less than 20 degrees, just like we did in Flight Simulator. And let's get our HSI visible. So we'll fly until our HSI, till our heading bug is over at the 3 o'clock position, exactly like we did in Flight Simulator. There we go. Look back over at the airport, figure out, I'm probably at a point now where I want to turn. Nampa traffic, 5 Golf X-ray, turning left downwind for runway 29, Nampa. Okay. And we are almost at pattern altitude. There we go, Chris, cooling off the oil. Perfect, thank you. So there's our heading bug down at the bottom of the HSI, and we've reached pattern altitude, so we're going to pull some power back. And just like before, although you can't see it on the camera because we're not using virtual reality this time, I'm looking over at the wing strut, making sure that the runway is about halfway up the wing strut. We are now abeam the 1,000-foot markers, just like I said to you in Microsoft Flight Simulator, so we're going to make sure our fuel is on. We're going to turn our carb heat on. We're going to turn our landing light on. We're going to power back, and we're going to do a speed check. In this case, before I deploy any flaps, I'm going to get down below 80, and I'm going to deploy, in this particular aircraft, just 15 degrees of flaps. When we do that, we're going to nose down a little bit, pull back the power back a little bit more, and I'm still looking at the threshold over my left shoulder of the runway. And then we're going to say Nampa traffic 5 Golf X-ray turning left base for runway 29, Nampa. And as we're turning left base, I'm easing the nose up just a little bit to bleed off the airspeed to get to the point where I can now deploy full flaps. As I'm deploying full flaps, I'm letting that nose drop back down a little bit and adding a little bit of power and looking over at the threshold of the runway. This is where your judgment, because you can't see the PAPI lights yet, so this is where your judgment really comes into play. So ideally, we're looking for about a 500 foot per minute descent rate at a speed that is around 65. In this aircraft, no more than 70 because of the flaps, the maximum speed for full flaps, which is 70 knots. So we're getting a little low, so rather than change pitch angle, I am adding power back in to slow our descent. Nampa traffic, 5 Golf X-ray turning left base to final runway 29, Nampa. All right, and so here we've got a couple of PAPI lights. You won't be able to see them on the screen yet until we get the plane pointed at them. Right now, as we are turning base to final, we've got 2 white lights, so I'm just a little tiny bit high, but that's okay because it's really going to allow me to illustrate the point that I was illustrating around the second lap of Flight Simulator. So, overspeeded the flaps there just a little bit. So pull back on the power, pulled that nose up to lose that speed. There we go. So now we've got our 65 knots, and I'm keeping those numbers right in the same spot on the windshield, the 29. So at this point in final, what you want to be doing is flying with a constant speed, which also means a constant pitch. And there's our one red PAPI light that we wanted to see. Flying right on down to the 29 while maintaining, and I sped up just a little bit there. Chris was going to point at it, so we've got that corrected. But notice no change in the pitch. Right down to the 29, right down to the 29, and I'm just staring at the 29.
Runway 29 for departure.
And staying in the same spot on the windshield, and now we've flown over the 29, so I've pulled power back to idle. There's the round out. Floating, trying not to land, trying not to land, trying not to land, trying not to land, and the wheels go down beautifully on the runway. And that is how you do it. So we'll put our flaps up. We'll put our carb heat in. By keeping on the center line, we'll go back to full power. Airspeed is alive, and up we go.
I hope that video helps you to fly around the pattern of a non-towered airport a little bit better and land a little bit better. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you would hit the like button and leave a comment. If you have questions, of course, leave those down in the comments below. And if you'd like to see future videos from me, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and you may even want to consider visiting my website flywithtrent.com, where you can enter your email address so you'll receive email notifications of new videos. Plus, you'll get access to my free email course on how to pick the very best flight school for you. Thanks for watching. See you in another video soon. Take care. Bye-bye.